So then it's 1:30, and I would like to start this meeting here on the fourth CBA guideline. First of all, before we really start, I would like to inform you that we are going to record the Teams meeting, which means that everything that is spoken and detected by the microphones will be recorded. And also, of course, the slides will be recorded, but we don't have any cameras here, so we're not spied by anything. And that being said, I would like to hand over then to Gerald Kendler, which is the chair of the System Development Committee at ENTSO-E, and he will give a short introduction.
Niels, thank you very much for the very quick introduction. And here, first of all, it is a hybrid event, so I apologize for the people who dialed in at 1:30. That's when we started our get-together, have a nice coffee break together. And but now the content-related stuff, really official stuff starts. And we will analyze the participation of the event, and then we'll come to a conclusion in the future if we will do hybrid events again, or if we will use other setups. First of all, I would like to welcome all our visitors here, of course, in Brussels and in Europe. And from what I've learned from the applications around the world, I think we have people listening in from several continents, and a very warm welcome to all of you. And why is this? I think everyone knows that energy infrastructure, especially with the war in Ukraine, has a real impact on how our society works, has a real impact, has a real value. And when we're talking about value, we'll come directly to the cost-benefit analysis. But it's not only the value in regard of money, it's really the value for society. And people realize that all interconnectors, all infrastructure have a value, and that is what we are talking about. And here we come to the TYNDP, and the TYNDP really provides an excellent European-wide vision on how the future power system should look like, on the interconnectors, and how everything should work together. And in designing the future grid, it's very important to evaluate the value of the power lines, of the interconnections. And here, of course, the CBA guideline is the most important tool. And we just thought here about CBA guideline. It's the fourth version we're talking about. The first was developed more than 10 years ago. And within those 10 years, we really had a strong development. This development was, first of all, we are learning. Second, we got lots of input from you, our stakeholders, to improve our work and improve the guidelines. So a big thank you for all the interaction. And also we have new requirements all the time. And if I may say so, especially with the CBA 4.0, we have specific new requirements that come from the 10E regulation. The new 10E regulation puts a special focus on the CBA. And you will see a few specific items. I would just like to point out two of them, which are really important to me. The one is the energy efficiency first principle. I think energy efficiency is the key to really come to climate neutrality. And also energy efficiency is the key, as we see this year, to reduce the impact of the missing energy import. So energy efficiency is also always very, very good. We should strive for it. And so it needs to be reflected. And it's good that it's reflected in the regulation, and it's good that it's reflected in our work. And the second point that's really important is the multi-sectorial planning. I think the times are over when you can just think about the electricity network, just think about gas, or just think about transportation. At the end, you will have to think all of those things together. And this will be a long road, much longer than we took so far to come from CBA 1.0 to 4.0, but it's a very valuable road. And again, we are working on those things, and we are introducing them in our work. And with those things, I would really like to pass on the floor back to Niels, and maybe here first thank you to Niels, because Niels is the convener of the drafting team CBA, and he is doing lots and very intense work. He made the CBA 3.0 happen, and he's working now on the CBA 4.0 with his team, and I'm sure he's going to introduce the team around the way. Niels, the floor is back to you.
Yeah, Thank you, Gerald, for this also short and interesting introduction. So, yeah, what I would like to do now is first giving an introduction about the speakers of today. So, Gerald, you have already recognized, and then we have Patricia. She is the leader or the convener of the steering group of the TYNDP team. She will later then before the end of this meeting here, give an overview about the CBA and the TYNDP and how this all comes together in the process. Then I have to my right, Fabiola, which is a team member of the drafting team CBA. She will give an overview about the assessment of hybrid projects. And to my left, I have Belen. Wait, talk like this. I have Belen. She will give an overview about the European targets that are introduced in the CBA guideline. And I have Philip then giving an overview about the multi-sectorial implementation in the CBA guide. So it's not in that order that I've introduced them, because the order is given here in the agenda. We will start with the snacks and the introduction. This already happened. And then we will give a general overview about the CBA guideline, mainly about the process, how everything comes together, and how we have involved and improved the CBA guideline since the CBA 3. I would like to give an overview about the process, how the CBA 3 has been developed, and why we are not yet with the final approval from the European Commission. And then I would like to give an overview about what we are going to do with the CBA 4 guideline. Then we are jumping into the information about the updates, the content-wise updates of the CBA guideline. And I will give an overview about general aspects that have been introduced in the CBA guideline. And then we will give overview about some of the main topics that have been introduced, which is the multi-sectorial assessment, the assessment of hybrid projects and radial projects. So this was just left out here in the caption, but is also included. And about the assessment of the commissioning years. Then we will have a short coffee break. And after this, we will have one additional topic, which is the contribution to the union targets, where we have some information in the CBA guideline. And then we have opened a discussion point here where we can talk together and answer some questions and get some input, of course, also to the CBA guideline, because this is, from our perspective, one of the main reasons why we are giving this meeting here, this workshop, to really get feedback from you, what we need to implement, or what in your eyes we need to implement, and what is very important, what is not so important. And so to really get some feedback from you, this would really help us also in the future. Even if we don't include everything right now in the 4th CBA guideline, we will note this down and maybe then think about this further in the future, maybe for a 5th CBA guideline or an updated version of the 4th guideline. And then I will give Patricia will come and give an overview about the TYNDP process. And finally, I will give a conclusion and show you the next steps, how we are proceeding with the CBA guideline. And then I think we will be in time. Maybe we won't even need until 5:30, because now we're already 5 minutes ahead of the time, which is good. So we can spend a little bit more time than to the content. And with that being said, I would like to give a short overview about how we are organizing this call here. So we won't check the chat of the Teams meeting for any questions, but we give you the opportunity to ask some questions via the Slido. And you see the QR code here on the screen, which you can use for the Slido, but you can also go to the Slido page and then type in this number that is in the first bullet shown. So I will leave this slide for a little bit longer. And after each of the topics, we give you the opportunity for answering 1 or 2 quick questions on the Slido. And this will then also be shown in time after each of the topics. I already said that the workshop will be recorded, which means that the Teams meeting will be recorded. So anything that is being said will be recorded. And with that, I would like to give you a general overview. Basically, this is, as I already mentioned, on the process, how we were going to come to the CBA 4 guideline. First, I would like to give you an overview about the CBA 3 guidelines so that you understand what all is included and what needs to be considered when developing such kind of a methodology in this big framework of the TYNDP and under the ENTSO-E umbrella, where over 40 parties are working together to draft this kind of a methodology, and where lots of stakeholders are also having and giving their opinion and have their minds what needs to be considered in the CBA guideline. So first of all, clearly we were starting by experience from the second CBA guideline. So this was, let's say, the basis. We were not building everything from scratch. So we were building up on top of what we already had in the CBA guideline, second version. And then we were sitting together in the drafting team CBA, giving ideas and brainstorming what needs to be implemented. Then we were giving a public workshop, which was in 2017, end of 2017. And after this workshop, we did something that we have never done before. We gave the public the direct possibility to interact with us in some work streams, which were basically focused on the SOS indicators to see what indicators and into what direction we should go with the security of supply indicators here. So we were really working together with the public. We were organizing some meetings in these work streams and were then getting some output from this, which we were introducing in the CBA guideline. Or we also just got some feedback that for the moment, it seems like this is nothing that can be implemented in the CBA guideline directly, but it might be seen for future editions. So this has also all been wrapped up in the CBA 2 process, or no, in the CBA 3 process. And then after that, we were going back, drafting the CBA guideline, obviously. And then after we have finalized the CBA guideline from the ENTSO-E point of view, we were opening for the public consultation after another public workshop, and of course, including also comments from ASA, where we had in this period a lot of interaction with ASA, and we were showing them the guideline already before we were starting the official process. So to mitigate the risk to getting into delay with the official process. And yeah, in this process, we were continuously discussing with the European Commission and also with ASA, just because we would like to have a smooth approval process then when we were starting the official process, which, by the way, started then by opening for the consultation, which is a requirement from the 10E regulation, from the updated one, but also to that point in time, also for the regulation 347, which was the, say, elder 10E regulation. There we had to run through a public consultation. And in parallel to the consultation, we were also running intense discussions with ASA and the European Commission again. Then after the consultation, we at the drafting team CBA were going back, including some or most of the comments from the consultation, thinking about what would be possible and what not. And then we were sending this to ASA and starting the official approval process. And also to be mentioned, I already said this, we are at ENTSO-E working at roughly about 40 TSOs together. And we always need an approval of such kind of document. So when we are sending anything out, we also need to run internal approvals. So everything that we are going to do needs some time, because we need to have the working phase, we have the approval phase, and then we can send it out. And this always, when we make some adjustments and then sending it out again, we always need to run through this, let's say, kind of lengthy approval process. And therefore, it's kind of always time consuming. And we need to think about how we can manage in time all the deadlines that are given up to. Then the official process says that ASA had 3 months time for their opinion. After this, they were sending us their opinion and also to the Commission, and then the Commission had 3 months time for their opinion. And we received then back from the European Commission their comments in December 2020. And after this, we were then amending the CBA guideline and sending it for approval to the European Commission, which took then again from the Commission a little bit longer. And therefore, we received in 2022, so last year in March, we received for the CBA 3 the partial rejection, which means that they have more or less approved the main document, but there was one section that they have not approved, so therefore they called it the partial rejection. And after this, we have discussed with the European Commission how we can proceed with the CBA 3 guideline. And we have finally agreed that we are just deleting this section that was questioned by the European Commission and resubmit it to the Commission for their approval. And this happened in October 2022. And now we are currently waiting for the approval from the European Commission, which might come in Q1 this year. But this, of course, depends on the European Commission, and we are looking forward for a positive approval. But this is the reason why we are still having not the approval of the CBA 3 guideline, although it has been used already for the TYNDP 2020 already. When you look at the timeline, the CBA guideline was just in the approval phase when the TYNDP 2020 came out. And then we also used it for the TYNDP 2022. And now, from the updated 10E regulation, we are requested to update the CBA guideline by 24th of April this year. So therefore, we already have to start the work on the CBA 4 guideline before we have the CBA 3 guideline ready. But the European Commission said that they would like to have the CBA 3 guideline ready before the PCI process is finalized. So that's kind of the corner or the main points which are to be considered here. And now I would like to give an overview about what we are going to do with the CBA 4 guideline. We are more or less going the same approach, but from the 10E regulation, something has changed. So therefore, we don't have to run exactly the same approval process, but it is mainly the same. And also, we are not involving the public with such kind of work streams, which in the past turned out to be very fruitful, of course, but also very time-consuming. And currently, we don't have the time because we have to finalize it in months. And with what I've mentioned earlier, we also have to run through this internal approval process. So the real working time has now become very short. After we are closing the consultation, we need to amend the CBA guideline, and then we are sending it for the official approval process. And the starting point, of course, was again the last version of the CBA guideline, which is 3. Then in the meantime, while we were approving or getting the approval from the CBA 3 guideline for the TYNDP 2022, we were drafting implementation guidelines of the CBA guideline, because the idea of the CBA guideline is that the main principles are covered within the CBA guideline, while all the details are given in the implementation guideline, which are specific for the respective TYNDP. And this has been done last year, the drafting of the implementation guideline. This document has also been published together with the TYNDP package. And we also were giving some details, of course, that were missing in the CBA guideline, or not missing in the CBA guideline, but are required for doing the calculations, because we don't want to give all these details and data in the CBA guideline itself. This is one part of the implementation guideline, and the other part of the implementation guideline is also to allow for giving some updates already, or yeah, we can say playing around a little bit with some ideas that we have that might work and might come into the next version of the CBA guideline. This is also what we have done in this implementation guideline. For example, we already introduced a multi-sectorial part and the hybrid projects, which is, I would say, the main part that we took from the implementation guidelines. So this are already concepts that have been introduced in some of the documents and are now transferred to the CBA guideline. While we were, of course, taking the learnings from the implementation guideline and the TYNDP implementation when we were then drafting it for the CBA 4 guideline. Then we at the drafting team CBA were going back in our rooms and were drafting the CBA. And then we were starting the public consultation by 15th of December last year. And we will end this consultation by 1st of February this year. And of course, also, again, we had to internal approve this document, which always is necessary to get the approval of all the involved parties at ENTSO-E. Then after the consultation, we will get your feedback from the consultation and also from this workshop today, and think in the team about what can be implemented in this short time before we are sending it out for the approval. And there we will go back and let's say redraft might be the wrong word, because we cannot in this short time frame really redraft the CBA guideline, but we are doing our best to implement as much from the commons as possible. And in the meantime, we will also start the communication, or not really start, but continue this communication with ACER and the European Commission before we are sending it to the Commission officially. And then after we have sent the CBA guideline officially to the approval process by 24th April, and I think we will meet this date. So after this, then we are breaking, let's say, the 10E regulation. This is nothing that we would like to do. And I'm also optimistic that we can do this, but I think we can also not make it earlier. So we would need the time, and we are really focusing this 24th April for sending the CBA guideline out for the official approval process, which will then be sent to the European Commission, to ACER and the member states. And I think also to some specific stakeholders, they will also be introduced. And in this period, then 3 months after having submitted this officially, then ACER needs to come up with their opinion to communicate this to ENTSO-E. And the European Commission might in this process also organize some specific meeting and inviting some specific stakeholders, which is a requirement which has newly introduced in the updated version of the 10E regulation. Then after this, after getting the feedback from ACER, which this is kind of a little bit a change in the approval process, it will directly go back to us, where we will then make amendments of the CBA guideline based on the comments that we have received from ACER, but also from the possible meetings organized by the European Commission. And after this 3 months period, we will again need to have an internal approval and then send it out to the European Commission for their approval. And they have given themselves 3 months for their approval. And after this, after we have received the approval from the Commission, we need to publish the CBA guideline on our webpage, and we have weeks' time. And of course, we always have a good relationship from the working team, the drafting team CBA, with the respective guys at the European Commission and at ACER. So we are currently also discussing with them directly on the CBA guideline, and they are having already a good picture about what we have implemented in the CBA guidelines, so that there should not be too many surprises for them. And with that, this is basically the process of improving the CBA guideline. And now I would jump into the content, which are the main improvements. Of course, we were running through the document and seeing where we have some typos and unclarities which have been fixed. And we have also shifted some sections compared to the CBA guideline to make it easier to read and understand the CBA guideline. So this is something that we are always and constantly doing. Also after the consultation, we are going to through the document, and if we find something which might be more clear in a different way, then we will always amend this. But these are what we call the minor changes, and the major changes are then Content-wise, what we have included mainly or based on the 10E regulation. Here I have some examples now building up in the next bullets. This is the energy efficiency first principle. How to consider this in the TYNDP process and also in the CBA then. Then we have added several sensitivities to the document and also drawn a little bit more attention, a focus on sensitivities and the importance of sensitivities in such kind of studies, which was also a 10E requirement. Then we have added a methodology for the contribution to union energy targets, which we will hear about this later on a little bit more, and also from the 10E requirement. And then we have added a methodology for the assessment of commissioning years, where I will also give a short overview about this methodology. And if you have read the CBA guideline, it's of course also already in anything that I'm mentioning here. So we have made no changes to the document then. So in principle, you could already know everything that I'm showing here, but I would like to draw the attention to these updates. So we have updated the Black Start service indicator, which has been used in the past TYDP as so-called project level indicators, which means that we at ENTSO-E level were not or had not the tools for calculating this, or the data was lacking, so that we were allowing for the project promoters themselves to submit this, and we at ENTSO-E level were then just approving the methodology the project promoter was. So this is one of the improvements that we were doing here, but for this specific indicator, we would need some more additional improvement to really apply this or make this applicable in the TYND. Then we have further elaborated on parts generalizing on the multi-sectorial modeling, where we will also hear something about soon, and methodology for the assessment of hybrid and radial projects. We will also have a section on this today. And then we deleted the section on the grid transfer capacity, which was the GTC, basically because we figured out that it was not really used in the TYNDP, and therefore, for clarity reasons, we decided to delete this section. Then we deleted the section on the assessment of storage projects, because from the 10E regulation, it is now upon for the European Commission to come with a methodology for storage projects. Therefore, it's not in our responsibility any longer. And so with this overview about the general improvements, I would like to give you an overview about the 10E requirements that we have covered, or as you see on this slide, not yet covered all of them. But basically, I don't want to go through all of these bullets. They are given in the Annex 5 of the 10E regulation, and the article numbers are here in the first column given. So, for example, we were giving what the area for the analysis shall cover and who ENTSO-E shall cooperate with. So this is just an overview about what we need to implement in the CBA guideline. And as you see, most of these bullets and of the articles we have covered within our CBA guideline. What we have not yet covered is the methodology shall explain that the development and deployment of renewable energy will not be hampered by the project. So this is something where we also need to continue the discussion with the European Commission, what exactly this means. But we already, of course, have our idea what this means and our interpretation, but we would like to jump back with the European Commission to really figuring out what they expect from us here. And then we are also going to implement this after this consultation phase and before we submit it officially to the European Commission. So that's one bullet that is not yet included, but we are working on this. And on the next slide, you will also find one thing, which is the climate adaptation measures to be taken for each project. Here also we need to clarify and discuss with the European Commission to what extent they are wanting us to implement this in the CBA guideline, if this should turn out into becoming an indicator or if it's just a general concept. which should be mentioned. So this needs to be clarified together with them. But the rest of this has been mainly introduced in this. And with that, now jumping to some of the methodologies that shall be included for Article 8, where we have some. So the methodology shall take into account at least the CapEx and OpEx. This has already been in the CBA guidelines, so there was not much to do for us for this version of the CBA guideline. Then it should give guidance on discount rates, which was also in the CBA guideline, and also include of mandatory methodologies. This is part of the CBA guideline. In general, it's nothing that we needed to specifically introduce in the CBA guideline. And also methods to calculate the climate and environmental impacts. Those were already in the CBA guideline. So this is nothing for update for the CBA 4, but it is a requirement from the 10E regulation, from the updated one. So therefore, I gave you the overview about this. And again, another table with some checkboxes and positively checked. I don't want to bore you with some of these going into the details over and over again. So basically, from what we have interpreted from the 10E regulation, most of the requirements we already have included. It has already been in the CBA guideline, for example, in the CBA 3, or we have been taking care about including it in the CBA 4 guideline. And also here for the Annex 5, Article 2, we also think that we have mainly included them, except of the climate impacts and all the other relevant parameters where we also need to think further into detail how we can implement this, but we are, of course, working on this. And with that, I am done with this short introduction. This was not much information in this short time, but you can type down your questions and later on we will have for the discussional section the possibility to discuss in detail a little bit more. And that being said, I would like to hand over to Philip, who's now going to give an overview about the multi-sectoral assessment approach in the CBA.
Thank you, Niels, for handing over. So yeah, this session or topic is on multi-sectoral cost-benefit assessment. So first question is why do we need that? So I think it's not a secret that sector coupling will play a major role in future, and it is foreseen that a highly coupled energy system will enable us to better utilize the output from renewables. So I mean, here as a very prominent example, we can see the coupling between the power system and the hydrogen system, for instance. So if you have a lot of electrolyzers or in combination with underground storage, then we can use these configurations to basically shift energy from the summer into the winter. And here this cross-sectorial flexibility in the long-term perspective would here act as a very valuable part in the system. So in consequence, can you go for the next slide? Ah, yeah. Okay, cool. Perfect. So in consequence, the European Commission recognized this topic as very relevant and also important. And here you see basically two boxes describing some or giving some passages on the 10E. And here, just to mention, we should together with ENTSO-E and ENTSO-E come up with new methodologies for a harmonized energy system-wide cost-benefit analysis. And also, we should basically come up with an integrated model that basically capture all these interactions between the different sectors. In the second box, you can also see that we should also consider a modeling part that basically describes cross-sectorial impacts. And all of these requirements we try to fulfill with the new CBA 4 guideline. And if you go to the next slide, here you see basically how we have included that in our CBA 4 guideline. So first of all, it is basically based on the MSPS roadmap. So MSPS stands for Multi-Sectorial Planning Support. And this roadmap was published in 2022 by ENTSO-E. And we can basically see that this is the concrete implementation of the MSPS. So we have a very general approach. So our concept is very general. So this allows us for having a still room for adaptations, and this has also a benefit because then we don't need to amend over and over again the DT-CBA guidelines. So we can still, if we keep it very general, we can just then make the details in the implementation guidelines or drafted implement. So as I told you, it's very general, so we can consider multiple sectors, and this allows us also for doing so-called dual sector or dual CBAs. But we are not restricted only to dual CBA. So dual CBA mean that we just consider two sectors. So our approach is really more general. So we can consider multiple sectors, could be 3 or 4, or even less. Also, we can consider any sector. So it's a very generic approach. So we don't have any limitations on that. And so to define sectors, what are sectors? Sectors are for us, could be energy carriers. This could be hydrogen or methane, for instance, or it could be also final demand sectors, which could represent mobility or heat. And it's worthwhile to mention that this is an optional concept, so we can still fall back to our existing CBA, I would say. And we made basically adaptive changes on the socioeconomic welfare, which is the B1 indicator. And as I already told, if we want to amend something, then we can do that in the TUNDP 2024 implementation guidelines. So when it comes to very specific details, we will draft that in the implementation guidelines. And this can be, for instance, which sectors we would look at, or or which final demand sectors we should comprise. So these kind of things will be then treated in the implementation guideline. Okay, for next. So we have drafted several modeling options that and it's only, as I already told, it's very focused on the socioeconomic welfare. And we have basically two methods at hand. One approach is the generation cost approach, where we just sum up all the costs of the system. And we have another one, which is the so-called total surplus approach. And we can now use these approaches to capture the multi-sectorial modeling or the impacts of multi-sectorial influence. So we have on the right-hand side, we can still have single sector modeling, which means that we just run power system market simulations, and then we can just calculate the socioeconomic welfare for electricity. But we can then also correct these socioeconomic welfare with so-called cross-sector rents. So this I will explain later on. So here we can then also capture in the single sector modeling the influence on sector coupling. Most importantly is the integrated multi-sector modeling. And this basically requires an interlink model. which we are, by the way, also developing with ENTSO-E together in the interlinked model project. And this allows us also to calculate the so-called global socioeconomic welfare. And we can then, and this is a really important concept. So if you go to the next slide. So because at the end, we don't have any double counting or missing benefit problem. So at the end, the global socioeconomic welfare captures the entire benefit of a project. And while considering or capturing all the mutual influences of sector coupling, and this is a big plus here. Here on the table, you can see, again, the two approaches for calculating the socioeconomic welfare, SU called, and also the changes in green that we made in comparison to the CBA Guideline 3. So you basically see that the global SU in the generation cost approach are basically just the sum of the generation costs without a project overall sectors minus the sum of the generation costs with the project overall sector. I mean, that's a very easy one. I would say it's really straightforward. And in the same straightforward way, we can also come up with a total surplus approach where you just sum up all the total surpluses overall sector. And just to remind you how the total surplus is decomposed. So we have here standard components, which are namely producer surplus, consumer surplus, and congestion rents. So this is basically the standard decomposition. And then we have an optional component that is called cross-sector rents. And these basically capture the movement of social welfare along the sector. And I just want to give you in the next slide an intuition how this works. So what are cross-sector rents? So they describe basically the welfare movement along the sectors and capture the monetized cross-sectoral impacts. And when I remind you in the beginning of this presentation, so this was also a requirement from the 10E, and this concept could be used to fulfill the 10E requirement. So here's an illustration for these cross-sector rents. You see on the left-hand side a market for energy carrier A, and this is the clearing, like where we have supply and demand curves that match together and form a price P1. And on the right-hand side, you see basically a market for energy carrier B. Could be, for instance, hydrogen, and A could be electricity. And here we have the same clearing diagram. And now, if we include a project that allows us for transferring or conversion from one carrier to another, we just put that into the markets for energy carrier A. And this means that we would basically shift the demand curve on the right-hand side, S1, to P1 prime price. So this means you would basically lift up the prices a bit on the left-hand side. And then you would basically convert that energy to market B, which then corresponds or represents a shift from the supply curve S2 to the right. And this will then clear to lower prices P2 P2 prime. And basically this is the movement from one sector to another. And this is basically a benefit that could be then monetized. It's very analogous to congestion rents. So basically these cross sector rents, they depend on the price difference P2 prime minus P1 prime, and they can be used then to monetize the cross-sectoral impact. This is basically a very generic concept that could be used for any energy carrier or for any other sectors. And with this, we basically can then fulfill the 10E requirements. Yeah, that's it from my part. So I think this is the end. We have now 2 Slido questions for getting your feedback from your side. And so the first question would be, do you see this as a valuable and reasonable approach to work towards multi-sectoral CBA for future editions of the TYNDP?
Okay, we will give you some time for filling in the Slido. I think it's one of the easy ones, just don't know. Or I have no opinion. 12 people have already responded. So for the moment, looks like that most of the people are, at least that have participated in this Slido, see it as a good approach going forward. Of course, I would say there's always room for improvements, but as we are building up a very general approach here with this, basically what Philip has done, I think we are having now built a good basis for building up for the future. And it seems that most of them, 34 have already participated, and over 50%, almost 60% saying that this is a good approach, just 6% saying that this is not a good approach. Maybe we can, from those, maybe we can get later on a feedback on why they don't see this as a good approach. That would, of course, very helpful. If you might keep your disagreement with this methodology for later when we are going to ask you general questions. So I think not too much is happening here any longer. So with this being said, I would like to hand over now to Fabiola for the next topic.
I think there's another one. So
okay, sorry, there's another question. First of all, then.
So then which sectors do you think need to be specifically modeled, integrated, and with what priority? I mean, this is also very helpful to get feedback from your side.
I will give you a little bit type here again because you need to type in some things, just not yes or no. Ah, you see how many are typing, not who. That would be good. Production, hydrogen structure. So gas, hydrogen, electricity seems to be very important, but it seems like more or less all of the sectors that you can imagine are popping up here. And yeah, we need to think about what would be the next step for implementing in the CBA guideline or in the TYNDP, what sectors to build up first, because I think it's not best approach to jump in with all of the sectors that are possibly to be considered. So therefore, we need to think about which sectors we focus first and then building up in the future on the other sectors. But transport sector, mobility, I've read it also earlier. Gas, hydrogen, station. So, okay, thank you, of course, already for this feedback. I hope this can be stored somewhere and we can see it then. So then we will have a closer look and see what we can do then in the future and what is most important here to be done. And now I would like to hand over to Fabiola for the assessment of the hybrid projects. But first of all, I would like to give a short introduction about what we understand under hybrid projects. And when we are talking about hybrid projects in the past, in the TYNDP 2022, we were really applying this methodology just for the hybrid projects from practical reasons, not for the radial projects, but here also in this CBA guideline, we are applying this methodology also for radial projects. So it's not really correct what we have written here, assessment of hybrid projects and radial projects it should be. But nonetheless, the definition is basically what we understand as hybrid project is basically anything that is not a single purpose project. And on the left-hand side on this figure, you see a single purpose projects, which is single interconnections between two market areas or two countries, which are denoted here as the greenish bubbles. Interconnected now by these pink lines. And you see also here, yeah, this is a representation of any fictive offshore development, whatever. So you see wind farms here in the sea and you see radial connections. And this is what we understand as single purpose. There's just one of them. There's just a connection of a generation to this market area, or there's a connection between two markets. So each of them are singled. And what we understand now under dual purpose or hybrid projects is when both of these two types are mixed together. What we don't understand under hybrid projects is the link between the different sectors. So because there's also some of definitions in other entities, I've heard already that hybrid project is also seen as interconnecting or merging two sectors together with one project. This is not what we intend to understand here with a hybrid project. So hybrid project is interconnection together with a generation. And this is now what Fabiola will talk a little bit about next.
So as Neil said before, in the TONDP 2022, we are already assessed some hybrid projects, and the methodology that was applied is described for TONDP 2022, and now it's same methodology. It's included in the CBA 4. And as Neil said, it's important to remind what is the definition of a hybrid project. So a hybrid project is a project that could be defined as a dual purpose, which enables in one side an interconnector function between two or more bidding songs, and also a client connection, for example, a REST connection. Just for illustration purpose, only the offshore wind technology is illustrated here, but we can apply this for other kind of technology. For the CBA, we propose two CBA setups for the hybrid projects. The first option is the option 1 in left side. Here we have the project is built on top of an existing radial connector REST by enable only an additional interconnection function. It's just the leg in orange in the figure. And in the second option on the right side, we can see that this project is developed anew as a hybrid interconnector. That means it's enabled both the interconnector between, in this case, country A and B, and also the integration of REST. So for go deeper in the CBA analysis, I propose to explain what are the benefit and the cost that we will assess. For the option 1 on the left side, we can see the reference grid in blue that include the radial project. And the project that we'll assess is the Dutch green line, is the connection between the offshore wind farm and the country B. So the project benefits for this option are the benefits that we compute from CBA guideline, the indicators B1, B2, etc. But it's the indicators that are related to the increasing of interconnection capacity between country A and B. And the cost of these projects are only the cost of this second leg that we add in the hybrid project. On the other side, the option 2, we can see that in the reference grid there is no project between country A and B, and we add the interconnector and the offshore wind farm. So the benefits that we see in the CBA assessment are the benefits coming from the interconnector, but also by coming from the offshore wind farm, because we add an additional capacity of wind energy. And the cost that we saw are the cost of grid connection. So the both leg, so the leg between the country A to offshore wind farm and the offshore wind farm to country B, but it's not included the cost of the offshore wind farm itself. So in this case, in order to do a correct assessment of CBA, we need to apply a sanity check to correct this assessment as a proxy for the cost of the rest generation that we add, because we see these benefits, but we don't see this cost. And this sanity check is not in the CBA 4, because we need to explain a lot of details, and it's not the main objective of the CBA 4. This sanity check will be defined in the implementation guidelines for UNDP 20. And finally, we can change. We can explain we can apply the same approach to radial projects, because we can see that radial project is like an option 2 project, but only for the first part of the project is the first leg with the offshore wind farm. So we proposed in the CBA 4 to harmonize the methodology between hybrid and radial projects by applying option 2. This in the CBA assessment, the benefits are corresponding to the REST integration that we can have adding the offshore wind farm. The cost only include the grid connection, the cables and the platform, but not the rest itself. So in this case, we also need a sanity check. This is the same sanity check that we apply for hybrid projects, and that will be described in the implementation. So that's what I would like to explain. And we included 2 questions also to have your point of view of this methodology. The first one is, what are your views on this proposed methodology?
Now it's open again for your contribution. So I think this is also again a free format input. So I will give you a little bit of time on giving us the feedback. And what I would like to mention is, if you're interested in how we're applying the sanity check, you can also have a look already on the UNDP 2022, where we already have applied this. And in the implementation guideline, it is already drawn out. So, but in the future, we will then update this course, in the CBA 20, the TYNDP 2024 implementation. Just to be mentioned. The question, can we answer this already? How does the methodology assess a non-EU country?
But the only difference that you can see is in the shoe decomposition. We, in this TONDP, we already introduced 3 perimeters: the perimeter all, the perimeter ENTSO-E, and the perimeter UE. And we can see here for the shoe the composition, but for the other indicators we cannot see.
Okay, what I see here as answer then is also positive, that the combined benefit of generation and action would be calculated. It's a good starting point, and this is also our impression, let's say. It's a starting point for learning out of what we are applying, and then building up on the what we have learned from this. We can then update this methodology. Need more discussion is also going to this direction.
Yes, I just like to respond to a question: who chooses between option 2 and option 1 and option 2? Is to the project promoter to define option.
Basically, this choice is up to the project promoter, but it should, of course, be realized in that way how the project is being submitted to the TYNDP. This is then already giving the definition if it's option number 1 or option number. Can we have a look at the questions already, or? Sorry? I don't know how your computer works. How do I scroll? Maybe you should come over. So does this only consider capacity or ancillary benefits, missing a lot of benefit? Not. We have an answer to this? Ancillary services, we have a PLI or what we call in the CBA guideline non-mature indicator, but in the application in the TYNDP, we call it project level indicator. I mentioned this earlier, where the project promoters can submit their information based on a methodology that has been drawn out by ENTSO-E. And this is then captured there. So in principle, we can also consider these benefits, but not specifically for the hybrid. Not familiar. maybe I postpone this answering the questions for after the meeting, or not after the meeting, for the discussion session. And then we will go back to the next question. There's another one. Do you see any element, information, or guidance missing from the purpose methodology? But it's good to see that there are already a lot of questions popping up. What we are aiming with this workshop here, to get feedback from you and yeah, as already mentioned, the sanity check, there is some information on the TYND within the TYNDP 2022 implementation guideline. Any part of the interconnection cost assigned to the generator support. Answer. As far as I understand the question, there's no cost from the interconnection assigned to surplus, because we are calculating this separately. The producer surplus that we are using to make the sanity check, calculated in a separate way, and therefore we have the costs, real costs for the interconnection, and then we have the assumption, let's say, for the offshore platform costs, which we are using then the producer surplus to get a proxy for this, just to assume or get an information about how much this offshore platform. So on the surrounding system, hybrid projects are potential generation, not the connection, a large impact surrounding. So point A from this question, I would say, is already considered, because this is the definition hybrid project, how we define it. And large projects will impact surroundings. I think in principle, this methodology can be applied to any kind of project, if it's large one, or is it just combining two market areas with a generation. It can also combine 3 areas with a generation. But what we are not considering is then possible changes that might occur due to this project on the markets themselves. So this is what we are currently not considering. We are just assuming that nothing changes when the project, except of course the installed wind capacity introduced by the project itself. But of course, this is something that also needs to be considered, because large projects will have an impact on the system in general. Some internal consideration, combining hybrid project investment sector method. Yeah, this is of course also some things that we need to tackle in the future, I would say. For the moment, we would like to leave it as separate, but in principle, I'm looking for Philip. We can also add this to the hybrid methodology, because the methodology for the multi-sectorial assessment is a general one, and methodology for hybrid projects, also kind of general one, but I think for these kind of projects. but with this approach from the multi-sectorial approach, this can be merged together so that we can get an of the sector. So option 2, clear definition of what elements cost belong to the grid project itself, what rest, which parts of. Yeah, this is something where do we make the break? So what is included in the costs? It's just the interconnection is within the cost, and then any assets concerning the platform for connecting the RES, but not the RES itself, and also not the connections from the RES to the from the platform to the RES. This is not. How would it work? Markets like Ireland. My microphone is maybe. Can you hear me better in that way? So maybe I need to do it like this. How would it work with markets like Ireland, Baltics, where the wind could easily exceed the total demand and hence fundamentally change the market? This is something that we have not specifically tackled because we were saying, as I already mentioned earlier, we are assessing the project with a given electricity system and then putting this project in and out and making the comparison. But of course, such kind of effects need to be tackled to some extent, but this has not been done in the TYNDP so far. But in principle, this is of course something to be mentioned, and yeah, we'll see how this can be done maybe in the TYNDP. Yeah, the sanity check is something that is highly demanded. Maybe we can get some additional information for the discussion. When we have the break, I will have a look if we can add a slide to explain the sanity check. And we are currently running out of time for this section, so therefore I would like to save this feedback so far and jump to the next. Yeah, also this lengthy comment that we have just received will also be then seen later on. I would like to jump to the next topic, which is the assessment of the commissioning years, which is a methodology. I would like to mention that the idea behind that is that in principle or in general, project promoters are submitting their projects to the TYNDP, and they are giving information like the commissioning year, length of the project, and all these kind of informations. And what we are going to do with this methodology is now to getting an assessment of the commissioning year. So the project promoter is giving the commissioning year, and we are applying a simple methodology on getting a feeling of whether the assessment, whether the commissioning year of the project promoter is in our eyes reasonable or not. This is just what we are going to do. What we are not going to do is to get an approval or disapproval of the commissioning year. We are just wanting with this methodology to give input for additional discussion. So if it turns out that the project promoter says my project will be built until 2025, and we are talking about the TYNDP 2024, so which leaves 1 year, and it's a 2 gigawatt interconnection, 3,000 kilometer long, then we might question this. And this is just what we would like to go with this methodology. Of course, this was a very obvious and stupid example, but this is the idea behind that. We are not going to say, okay, we disapprove your commissioning year or we approve it. We would like just to foster some discussions on the commissioning year. So then that we are going and then, okay, we're contacting the project promoter after our assessment, asking them how they can explain their commissioning year if it turns out to be seen with the methodology that we are giving to be unrealistic, let's say. So that the project promoter will always have the possibility to explain why they see, because This is a generalized methodology that I will show in the next slide. And of course, this does not cover every specifics of each of the projects. And each of the project is different. And therefore, it might be that some of the projects might become earlier or being faster to be built, and others might take longer. So this just being said, the idea behind this methodology is basically a very simple equation that is given here. So the starting point of the commissioning year, of the assessment of the commissioning year, is the year of the study. So for the TYNDP 2024, we will mark the year 2024. And then we will add to this year a number which is given by this formula here. And I would like to explain you. So T stands for the time, and T pre-perm stands for permitting, or respectively pre-permitting. So this is the time that a project will take before the permitting stage. Then we have T perm, which is the permitting time, the time a project needs to run through the permitting phase. And then we have T const, which is not constant, but it's the construction phase. This is the time how long a project needs for the construction. So this is basically the idea behind that. We are adding all these three together. Of course, if a project is already in the construction phase, the permitting and the pre-permitting phase would become zero, obviously. But this is logical, I would say. And then, of course, there are different projects. And for example, a DC project might take longer or shorter than an AC project, and also a cable, underground cable, might take longer than an overhead line. And these kind of specifics we have considered within these factors F1 to F5, which are then being multiplied with this sum of the times that we have defined earlier in the brackets here. And basically, these factors are varying, around 1, while 1 being the standard, let's say, for example, while we have not yet defined what is the standard, but it will go into the direction that AC overhead line will become a standard, will become a number 1, and then cabling will take a little bit longer, then the factor will increase. And for substations, of course, this factor then will become way below 1, because building a substation in general takes not that long than building a line with all the permitting and pre-permitting phase and construction, of course. So this is basically the idea. And what factors do we have? We have the F1, which is a factor that is giving what I already mentioned, if it's an AC or a DC project, which should give the complexity of building an AC project or a DC project. Then we have the F2 indicator, which is a standard factor indicating the complexity of the project with respect to its setup, whether it's an overhead line or a cable or a substation. Then we have the F3, which gives the complexity, whether it's an onshore or an offshore project. Then we have the F4 indicator, which gives the information whether it's a complete new project, which of course might take longer than a project that has just been an update of an already existing project. And we have a F5 indicator, which is considering the environmental and social impacts. There we are trying to link this factor with the indicator that we already have on the social and environmental impacts. So if you have high social and environmental impacts, then of course also this indicator here will become bigger. So that basically is the idea behind this. And again, I would like to mention, we are not going to approve or disapprove any commissioning dates, but just giving, let's say, additional input for discussions. And jumping to some questions, we have prepared here again a very simple Slido, yes, no, and I have no opinion about Do you find if an assessment of commissioning years necessary in the CBA guidelines? So this is, in general, do we need this methodology, or do you see we don't? So I'm very curious about the outcome, because if everyone's saying no, then we can discuss with Commission and ACER. We don't need it. But it seems like, at least from 18 now, it's 2/3 that are seeing that we need this kind of a methodology. And I think it's also a good approach to really get a feeling about if some commissioning years submitted by the project promoters are within a realistic range. Okay, so there seems to be a clear tendency, and I would like to jump now already to the next slide, which is another Slido. Do you think this simplification is sufficient in order to define a reasonable approximation for the possible commissioning year? Okay, yes and no simultaneously, great. Okay, seems like there is some improvement needed, and I have to say that I'm not disappointed by this answer, because we were also struggling through the last half year or even a little bit longer in defining such kind of a methodology. And we were trying out, I would already call it several ones, and we were always running into some problems with this methodology. But this methodology now is a basically methodology based on the feedback that we directly got from the implementation. No, was it implement? Yeah, from the implementation guideline comments from ACER, where they have drawn out a simplified methodology. And this basically was also the idea behind that. You can never put in all the information that would be needed from all of the projects, because then we cannot compare anything, because each of the projects is unique, and therefore it makes it very hard to define some kind of a methodology that could assess the commissioning year in a generalized way. So therefore we had to simplify this methodology, but of course each simplification makes it then harder to satisfy all of the stakeholders. That's of course clear, because so this was kind of a trade-off between complexity and simplification applicability in the TYNEP. So, but of course, then if there are 2/3 saying that there needs to be improvement, hopefully from the consultation phase, we will get some feedback how we can improve this. We are open here for any good ideas about how to improve this. And now we are 7 minutes ahead of time. I don't know how to manage this. Should we just then simply go to the coffee break already? It's now almost 5 minutes, so let's have a coffee break for half an hour plus 5 minutes, which we have just gained. So we see again 4:30, so 4:30. So my time says that it's past now, and we would like to continue. So what we are going to do now in the second part of this workshop is going to talk about the EU targets, which will be presented by Belen. And then after that, we have 20 minutes of discussion, where I will react on the request saying something about the sanity check. So this has already been included here, and of course, giving you the possibility to answer to the questions. We answer to the questions, but I think we will not manage to answer all of them. But in case there are some open questions, we will get back in the drafting team CBA, screening all the questions and then replying to them by email or stuff. Or publishing a publishing a document maybe on the consultation page at ENTSO-E level. So this is what we are going to do when we are not properly answering the questions today. And then after that, an overview about the TYNDP, and then conclusion and next steps. So with this, I would like to ask Belen to say something about the contribution to the union targets.
Okay, thank you, Niels. So let's go through the another improvement regarding the CBA 4 guideline that well has to do with the contribution to energy union targets. And in this regard, it has been included 3 energy targets, and the first one has to do with interconnection targets. So for this first target, we would like to go to the some recently passed when the European Commission in 2016 established the expert group on electricity interconnection target, with the purpose to provide advice on how to extend the 10% interconnection ratio target to the 15% target by 2030. So after some investigation from this group, they release a document where they recommend the development of additional interconnections that should be considered if any of the following 3 indicators that we are going to explain any of the threshold of these indicators is triggered. Okay, so the first indicator has to do with price differentials, and this group recommends or establishes a maximum threshold of 2 euros per megawatt hour, meaning that if this threshold, if the price differentials among borders of relevant countries, regions, or binding zones is over this threshold, then a newer additional interconnector should be considered. The second indicator has to do with ensuring the electricity demand in all conditions. And for this indicator, the nominal transmission capacity should be, well, if the nominal transmission capacity is below 30% of the peak load, means that new interconnection should be investigated. And the third one, regarding the interconnection targets, has to do with enable export potential for excess renewable production. In this case, nominal transmission capacity is compared over installed renewable generation capacity by 2030. So that again, the threshold is 30%. So one of the messages, important messages, you can see below in the slide, is that any interconnection project that helps member states to reach these 30% thresholds means that must be or must apply to be included in the 10 years network development plan and in the list of projects of common interest. So the next slide. The second energy target is referring the energy efficiency, and it's another requirement for the new regulation, for the new 10-year regulation. And as you may know, the European Commission has set an energy efficiency target of 32.5% by 2030. And this energy efficiency can be measured as the final energy consumption over the primary energy consumption. Okay, but what is this final energy consumption? Means the conventional demand of end-of-use appliances that can be extracted, of course, from market simulations, and the primary energy consumption can be computed, or it is the overall consumption of all energy carriers, and of course, again, can be determined easily from market simulations. And if we want to see the project impact on this energy union target, of this energy efficiency target, we have to well, calculate the data comparison for this project for this project with and without the project in the simulations. So it's something easily obtaining from the market simulations. And the third, if you go to the slide, the third energy union target has to do with the renewable penetration. And in this case, we are defining this energy target as the renewable energy source generation versus or over the total consumption. In this sense, the numerator, that is the gross final consumption of electricity from renewable energy sources, means that is the total quantity of electricity produced in a member state from renewable energy. And the total consumption, the final consumption of electricity, is the generation from all energy sources. And again, here we can measure, we can compute the project impact on this energy target, compare or making the delta comparison on this target with and without the project, as it's as you can see in the below part of the slide. So, well, this is very briefly explain how we have included or how we have considered these requirements for the new regulation in the CBA 4. And now I think we have 2 slides of questions, and for you to give us feedback in case, well, that are very interesting for us, like obtaining your feedback regarding this topic. So the first one is, do you find the addition of these union targets contributions is useful? Okay, for the moment, major part of the participants.
Seems like a clear tendency to be seen as useful. So I think there will not too much change here. So therefore I will go to the next question.
So the second question is, what other indicators would be of interest to be considered for the assessment of the union energy targets contribution?
Here again, free format question. So I give you some time for typing in questions. I think we can reply already to some of the questions. First question was, security of supply to be considered as well. What needs to be mentioned maybe is that the union targets that we have added here now are just these, how are they exactly called? Union energy targets. So those are those interconnection targets, let's say, basically, or not just interconnection, but also. But the rest indicator is already in there, and we already also have the SOS indicators themselves, and we have RES indicator itself, and we have CO2 indicator itself. So these are, per definition, already contributing to those targets. And with these specific targets, we just wanted to add some additional information that is given within the CBA guideline to these concrete targets developed by these, what's this group called again?
Union, the energy union target.
And the group that was working on that.
The expert group.
The expert group of these union targets. So that was basically what we were just transferring to the CBA guideline. I see inertia. This is something that is not yet tackled. System resilience. Changing and dumping energy. RES integration. So yeah, so basically I said, so RES integration is already a benefit indicator. So it is already a contribution also to the RES targets. Probabilistic indicators, this is of course very broad field, I would say, and would change the whole concept of how we are modeling the whole simulations and the whole system, let's say. And this is something that would be a bigger approach, basically not for the CBA guideline, but also for the modeling itself. So the implementation in the CBA, in the TYNDP. So storage capacities. I would say this is not within the scope of the CBA itself, because whether to add a project to the TYNDP or not depends on the project promoter mainly, and it's not a benefit indicator or something like that. Some information about storage types, storage and trends would be useful. I was intrigued by a startup Arnhem called storage types. I don't know a concrete answer to this. Some information about the storage types, but I tend also that it's not within the scope of the CBA guideline itself. So CBA still means costs and benefits, and whether this is a benefit or just an input to the TYNDP is something different. Bird fatalities per gigawatt hour of electricity produced. This is of course a reasonable indicator, but I think for the moment, again, this also goes beyond the scope of the CBA guideline. But this will go more into the direction of general indicators like environmental impact, social impacts, something like this, that this should be considered in such kind of an indicator. But yeah, environmental impacts, let's say, where this can be added. Storage impact, adequacy, and yeah, being on track of the Paris Agreement.
Yeah, this is a very interesting one.
Yeah, being on track with the Paris Agreement is basically considered within the scenario building itself.
Mhm.
So the scenarios are built that way that the Paris Agreement is met, or the union targets are met. Therefore, we can interpret then CO2 reduction indicator, which we already have, as contribution to this target. DSO, TSO communication, interactivity. I think this is something very important, of course, but it's not a benefit indicator or contribution to the targets, although this is requested within the 10E regulation itself that we are communicating. Okay, I think there will come up some additional questions, but we can also already go to the next slide. The questions will not be forgotten. We will, in the next days, get all the questions and trying to draft some answers to them and let you know then about the answers. Okay, basically now the discussion starts. We already had the discussion with the Slido questions, and we will give you the possibility to discuss further on with us via Slido, or here in the room also we have the possibility to get direct questions from you with a hand microphone then, so that everyone else not here in the room can also hear you. But first of all, I will go back to the sanity check for the hybrid projects. We have just added a slide that we were presenting ENTSO-E internally, so it was not produced, let's say, for the outside world, so it was not made nice, and it's just a rough version of this, so please don't take it too seriously. The content, of course, but the layout is not that nice, let's say. And it was just basically some ideas brought to paper, so please see it under this assumption. The sanity check. What I would like to say, first of all, this applies just to the option number 2 of the assessment of hybrid projects. For option number 1, we don't need any sanity check. And the idea behind that is that in principle, the problem is that we are considering the benefits of the whole new project. So we are considering the benefits that is coming from the RES. Now let's talk for this example just about a project that is including RES and connecting 2 countries. So what we are considering from the benefits is the RES integration, because with this methodology, we are adding for this specific project some additional RES capacity to the system. Therefore, it will also show up in the benefits. And we are considering the benefits of the interconnection itself. What we are then on the cost side considering is the costs from the interconnection, but not the costs of the RES. And this is the shortcoming of this. And this is the reason why we were then introducing or seeking about how we can consider also the costs of the projects, of the RES installation, of the generators themselves. And here we found that we don't have that good data on the costs of renewable energy sources offshore from the offshore platforms. And therefore we found that a good idea would be to find some kind of an approximation for these kind of costs. And what we did then is thinking about, when we think about the producer surplus, which should be in the range of the costs, this could give a first indication of possible costs. And therefore we thought, okay, we are calculating the producer surplus, interpreting this as costs of the renewable energy sources, and then also considering this within the CBA. And what the sanity check is then is a comparison with costs that we currently have. Because we have standard costs from the TYNDP scenario building for offshore generation, and we can compare then the costs of the producer, or the costs of these standard costs with the producer surplus that is calculated and assumed to be an approximation of the costs, and compare them with each other. And of course, we were in the TYNDP 2022, and this slide just shows the approach that we were using for the TYNDP 2022. In this TYNDP, we were also asking the project promoter if they have such kind of a project where they have applied option number 2, and if they have information about the costs for the renewable energy sources. If they were sending this, then we were also considering this within the sanity check. And what the sanity check then does is, for the first option, where we have standard costs, we were building up a range of standard costs by defining a minimum value and a maximum value, which is in these figures now denoted by these blue bars. So this is the range between the minimum and the maximum. We were calculating the mean value of this, which lies, of course, just in the middle between them. And then we were looking at the producer surplus, which in this figure here is denoted by PS. So in the very left figure. The producer surplus lies below this range. And what we were then doing is, because we were thinking about which one do we more trust, the producer surplus or the standard costs. And we figured out that both of them are uncertain and both of them might be the correct one or not, we don't know. So therefore we were thinking about how to bring both together, and we found, or we took the easy way. We were then just bringing the producer surplus or the assumed costs that we were then taking for this approach by the middle between the producer surplus and the mean value of the range, which is then shown here in this little star. This is then the value that we were using. And of course, in the very right plot, we can see that in this case, the producer surplus already lies within the range. And in that case, we say then, if the producer surplus lies within the range, then we are using this value as the assumption for the costs for the wind farms. And in the middle, it's just the case where the producer surplus is above the range. Then it will also be brought closer to the range by building just the middle between them. So that's basically the idea behind the producer surplus. And the same approach also applies for the situation when we have some information about the costs from the project promoters. In this case, we were defining the range by, how do we did this? By just building up plus minus 20% of the value that we were receiving from the project promoter. This is then the range, and then the same methodology applies to get producer surplus, which is interpreted. I can not say this often enough because this in the past has already led to some confusion. The producer surplus in this case is just interpreted as the costs for the wind farms. So we were bringing the producer surplus then closer to the range, so that we have then a value which takes the information from both information that we have from the producer surplus and from the cost that we have. So that basically is what we have done in the TYNDP 2022, which does not mean that in the 2024 TYNDP we will do exactly the same. So there is, of course, the door open for discussion and for any good ideas. And it might also be that we will receive some valid costs for the renewable energy sources or offshore wind farms. And in that case, then we can just jump back to using these costs to be considered in this methodology. But the important thing to be noted is the problem was we don't have good data for the costs, and therefore we were trying to get an approximation of these costs. That's basically the idea behind this. I hope this already answers some things. And within the implementation guideline, this methodology is also shown, and together with a little bit of text for explanation, of course. And with that, we can jump to the questions received so far. When I push the button, then I'm going back to the. Do I need to go to the Slido page? There. So the first question on the top is, why is the public consultation on the draft CBA 4.0 open for 1.5 months, closing on 1st February? Will ENTSO-E be open to receive stakeholder input within 3 months from the publication of the draft in 15th? So in principle, it is said that in this 10-year regulation, the public consultation should last for a reasonable amount, something like that. I don't know it by word, but it's something said like this, so that there should be sufficient time for the public to consult and to give some feedback. And it has turned out that in general, at ENTSO-E level, we were thinking about 6 weeks is a good amount of consultation time, and also with the European Commission, this has been more or less, I wouldn't say agreed, but it's state of the art as we are doing this with all of the other processes as well. And but of course, we are also open, at least in the drafting team CBA here, for any feedback that we get also out of the public consultation. So feel free to contact if you have some burning issues, then we will try to manage to get this in. But the public consultation, of course, is a process or a step in the process which is being considered in our planning, and therefore we can, after the consultation, have planned to have some time for integrating this in the CBA guideline or thinking about integrating this. And when we receive now 2 days before we are going to publish this, then of course we cannot consider this comments in the CBA guideline. So I would now give this a check. Oh, we should make it like this because I have my camera on, but then I have to increase. Is any part of the interconnection cost assigned to the generator surplus? I think we have already answered this earlier. In principle, it is not included as we were dividing costs and the surplus. So how would the CBA 4 methodology ensure that projects need to be, oops, can we fix this in some way? Or? Sorry?
Here, this is one.
Yeah, but it was on the top, and then I started reading, and then it jumped down.
Because someone writes.
Yeah, but I would like to fix this. So. And then it stays on the top. Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. How would the CBA 4 methodology ensure that projects needed to meet decarbonization targets are met? Would the reference grid system be compatible with Paris Agreement for EU? Else projects needed for decarbonization could risk negative SEW. I need to read it. If anyone else has an answer to this, then please feel free to answer for my support here.
The targets are met in the scenario.
Yeah, this seems to be a question concerning the scenario building and not the CBA itself. So it's the easy answer from my side would then be it's out of scope of the CBA. And the targets for the decarbonization are part of the scenario building.
Well, maybe want to add here, the projects, they cannot really meet the decarbonization targets. They rather contribute to decarbonization targets. So this we basically track with the SU or with the CO2 value. So we can basically evaluate that. So I think that should be considered in the guideline.
And what I can also say is that, of course, the reference grid has an impact on the outcome of the CBA. This is for sure. But I think the reference grid should not be measured against the Paris Agreement. It should be what is the most likely reference grid that we will, or the most likely grid that we will have in that date or when we are applying this study. So therefore, we are building the reference grid based on the most mature projects and those projects that we assume to be there when we are performing the study, or not when we are performing the studies, but for the time horizon that we are performing the study. So for example, for the TBNP 2024, when we are considering the time horizon 2030, then the reference grid should reflect the situation at 2030. And then the decarbonization is measured within the B2 indicator, and it is also monetized. So therefore, it might happen that projects have a negative SEW, although they are increasing or have a positive impact on the decarbonization. This might happen, but you can have a look at the TYNDP 2022 that lots of projects that are decarbonizing the system are also positive in SEW. And with this societal value of the CO2 emissions, they also get a positive benefit. If they are reducing CO2 emissions, then they are getting also a positive benefit from that. So spent a lot of time on this question. Wouldn't what you classify as cross-sector rent be covered by simply adding the surpluses in both sectors? And if not, why? May I ask Philip to take over this, because this is to the cross-sectorial.
Well, the cross-sector rent is an additional component, and it basically covers the movement from one sector to the other. So at the end, we can then also split this cross-sector rent to these sectors, or we could just we could just use that surplus attributing one sector. So I think here we are very general, and this will be then also a content of the TYNDP implementation guidelines. So it's basically one rent that is basically describing the translation from one sector to the other, or the movement, right? So we don't need to add basically the surpluses here.
Okay. Then I do this. Is the generation surplus for the generation connection projects radial going to be removed from the project benefit? The generation surplus. As far as I understand this question, it's basically the sanity check, and this can also be applied for the radial projects. So the answer would be yes, it's also reduced. Would CBA 4.0 allow for anticipatory investments, i.e. dimensioning the grid for also future, not just immediate RE build out? Which elements in the CBA 4.0 are most conducive, prohibitive for anticipatory investments in transmission? So I need to read this again because I don't understand this question currently. Anyone else has an answer, then please go ahead. So maybe I can try to answer this then. I think this is also not a scope of the CBA guideline. What we are going to do with the CBA guideline is basically we are getting projects to the TYNDP and we are assessing those against the indicators that we currently have. Yeah, identifying new projects might be some kind part of the identification of system needs, and I think Patricia will say something when she's talking about the TYNDP. But for the CBA, beyond the usefulness of these indicators, there is the risk of double counting benefits, considering that some of these aspects are captured in other indicators. Interconnection for X. I would question this question because I think we took care about not double accounting anything. So therefore, I would say there is no double accounting in the methodology. And if you have the feeling that there's double accounting, please give us concrete indication what you think it's double accounted, because this is really what also the European Commission and ESA are always having an eye on. And they are always pointing on this when something occurs to be double accounting with this respect. So please, although I was not really answering this question now, if you have some examples, then please let us know. How does the evaluation of ETS enter the assessment, especially since several of those aspects would be covered in the benefit indicators already, and give that there is some overlap at least between ET2 and ET3? Helen, may I ask you to answer this question?
Well, the evaluation will be done as in the rest of the projects, comparing the delta with and without the project from the scenarios, and considering the indicators that we have defined previously in the slide. But we do not think that there is any overlap between this ET2 and ET3, because the last one, the energy target 3, is referring to renewable energy sources, and the second one is referring to the energy efficiency, considering the total consumption. So we do not think there is any overlap. But the evaluation, the assessment will be done as in the rest per project, with and without.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you. So to all those factors, technology, location, environmental impact, affect all phases. I think this is related to the assessment of commissioning years. That affect all phases. As you might remember, those formula that was given. So we had the brackets, and within the brackets we had the times, the T, pre-permitting, permitting, and construction, and the factors are then multiplied to the result of the sum within the brackets. So therefore, yes, those factors do affect all of the phases. Of course, just in case that a project is in the pre-permitting phase, then all of those phases are considered. If it's already in the construction phase, then obviously there's no pre-permitting phase and permitting phase any longer. Oops, no, I was too quick, but yeah, we are almost done with the time here. So all the questions that will not be answered today, we will think about answering them in written then. In the assessment of commissioning years, methodology also meant to be applied to storage projects. As storage projects are yet no longer be part of the CBA guideline, because the methodology needs to be applied by the European Commission. We would not apply this methodology for storage projects. Although this is the current idea, but it's a good point. We were not thinking about this because storage projects have a different approach, and we should then add different factors to this. But this is maybe something for discussion with the Commission and also with ESA, whether to consider this. I'm always pushing twice now. So commissioning dates improve is required. Needs to be recognized that some projects are very simple if within stations compared to outside. Linear projects, either underground or overhead, also create a step change in timing. I would generally answer to this question that it's a simplified methodology that we are applying here. So therefore, of course, there might be some shortcomings. But with the factors, we are trying to at least getting a big picture about how to consider and compare the projects between each other. And if in that case it turns out that some project is evaluated unfair, then as said earlier and more often, we are not saying we approve or disapprove anything. We are just going to the project promoters then and asking them, okay, can you explain why you think you're having an earlier commissioning date? And then exactly these points can be discussed and be mentioned. So maybe the last question, or do you see some very important burning question here? I don't know. I just see the top question. Regarding double counting, how does the interconnection target, EU targets, is to be considered as interconnection is already considered at least in market integration C1 and SOS B2?
Well, the idea is to include the indicators that we have explained for the interconnection target topic. In fact, this interconnection target is included in the governance regulation of the European Commission, and the idea is to include the conclusions for this expert group measuring or trying to assess this 50% target by 2030 through these three indicators that has to do with price differentials, renewable energy integration, and security of supply through this comparison of capacity versus peak load. So at the end, this is something different from what is included in, I would say that C1 is B1, and I suppose, and SOS B2. This is something additional, not monetized, but to give a qualitative indicator about how this 50% of target interconnection ratio is accomplished through these three indicators.
Okay, I mark this as answered at least for the moment. So it's also not forgotten, this question, it will be stored. And when looking at the time, we are already 3 minutes above the time for this discussion phase. So what I would like to do now, I already mentioned that we are keeping this question and are trying to answer all of them in written then and let you know as soon as we have them. And I would like to go now to the next part of this workshop, which is an overview about the TYNDP and how the CBA guideline and then also its application will fit inside the TYNDP. And with that, I would hand over to Patricia.
Thank you, Niels. Thank you. Well, I think that it's interesting to tell you something about the TYNDP here today, because it's it's the main user of the CBA. That is the focus of today's webinar. I guess that you all know already the TYNDP. It's the European Electricity Infrastructure Development Plan, and somehow it's an exercise that is unique in the world because it provides a pan-European vision, a global vision for a whole continent. It provides where are the system needs located that we need to solve for the energy transition, and it assess also a whole project portfolio with the CBA. So, taking a look to the general process, can you go to the next slide, please?
Yes.
Every plan, every TYNDP starts with the scenario definition. They are a set of possible future which are used to assess future needs and to assess infrastructure projects. I saw many comments, many questions in the Slido that were related to the primary energy consumption, to demand, to consider sobriety in that demand definition. Also, perhaps have to be balanced with the with more electrification. So I guess that's the proper place to give your views on that as stakeholders is the scenarios. So please be aware of all the information regarding the scenario that ENTSO-E has in the website, and I encourage you to be engaged with all that part of the global TYNDP process. Yeah. The next step is to take those scenarios to the network, to the European system, and check what are the weak points. That is the identification of the system needs. The third step is the collection of projects that could solve those needs. We ask project promoters to propose transmission and storage projects based on the previous needs exercise. The applicant projects that are compliant with the ENTSO-E guidelines, with the technical and the administrative criteria that are included in those guidelines that are public, those projects are included in the T1DP project portfolio, and therefore they are assessed with the CBA, with the cost-benefit analysis, which is the focus of today, yeah, and that's why it's very important, because this CBA ensures a neutral and an equal treatment to all the projects, though. So it's a way of doing it in an objective way. These are the 4 steps of the T1DP, responsibility of ENTSO-E, with fit into the PCI process that is led by the European Commission. We go into this blue part that we have in the right part of the slide, and well, getting this PCI label, this project of common interest label, allows to some political support, to faster permitting process, access to good financing schemes, and occasionally to grants for studies, and very, very occasionally so for grants for works. So if we go to the next slide, we can take a look of the T1DP package, so the documents that are part of this master plan. Here you have some of the documents that you can find also in the ENTSO-E website. The ones that we have right now are the ones that has been published for the public consultation. And in the following weeks, we will have the final ones, or at least the ones that will be sent for the ACER opinion that includes all the feedback from that public consultation. So the main one is the high-level report of the T1DP, with the main findings, with the process overview, and that is complemented also with the stakeholder engagement report on all those feedback that come from the stakeholders and how they are included in the T1DP, and also the implementation guidelines that give some additional information on how the CBA is implemented in the assessment, as Neil has mentioned it in the beginning of today's presentation. Another part, if you go to the next slide, that is also important of the T1DP package is all the reports related to the system need study. This study tries to answer the question of what should the electricity grid look like in 2030 and 2040 to ensure continuous access to electricity, to create maximum value for Europeans, and to deliver on the climate agenda. We can see here, well, the main report that is called Opportunities for More Efficient European Power System. Yeah, there are also 6 regional investment plans that are required by regulation, and that go into detail on the needs and the concerns of each region. If you are interested in a certain country or region, don't hesitate to take a look on them. And those reports are also complemented with a document on general methodology, which is well, quite technical, also with a report on the system dynamic and operational challenges that complements the needs to ensure the stability of the system, and also a document on the methodology, a draft methodology on needs for hybrid infrastructure. Well, it's an exercise that has been done by the first time in the T1DP 2022. So if we go to the next slide, I want to go a little more in the details of the system need study, which is a relevant exercise. And as I mentioned at the general roadmap, is the basis for the call for projects for the T1DPs, and it will be the basis, this study, for the next call for projects that will be probably in May, June of this year. So here, well, the main key findings of this exercise is that there are opportunities for improving the power systems all over Europe. We will take a look later into some maps. Yeah. Also, that addressing system needs reduces Europe's dependence on gas-based power generation, and also that coordinated planning will be needed across sectors. We also have seen today many issues related to this topic. Yeah. If we go to the next slide, yeah, in this figure you can see the results of 2040 needs. Yeah, we have here 88 gigas of additional cross-border capacity on top of the 2025 grid, over 65 borders, also 41 gigas of battery storage, and around 3 gigas of CO2 free picking units. Yeah. In 2040, the highest needs for capacity increases are in all French borders, especially with the Iberian Peninsula, on UK continent borders, and to accommodate flows between the southeastern and Central Europe, and from Turkey through the Balkan Peninsula all the way to the Czech Republic. Yeah. Also, in most of the Western and Central Europe, these capacity increases are complemented by storage flexibility, with the highest needs in Spain, more than 10 gigas, in Germany between 5 and 10 gigas, also Italy, Portugal, Hungary, and to much smaller step by picking flexibility in Hungary and Poland, and on some isolated areas as Corsica and Malta. Yeah, so there are also a significant increase in needs after 2020 on Italian borders also, and on borders between Scandinavian countries and mainland Europe, so all over Europe. Yeah. And these values have been identified because the studies show an economic interest to solve them. So perhaps these investments more or less were quantified with 6 million euro per year, but they provide a global benefit of more than 9 million euro per year for the European citizens, yeah, for the European system. So if you go to the next slide, well, there is much more information on this type of studies, and so it has made an important effort to try to make all the results of the study easy to be consulted and interpreted. So don't hesitate to visit the website that we have here. There is a visualization tool, and I invite you to try to, well, to play with it. You can select a year, pick up a certain variable like curtail energy, like CO2 emissions, and you can see it in different geographical locations with different geographical aggregation, and over a map or over a bar chart. So, and you can also download the data. So I think it's a very useful material. Yeah. If we go to the next slide. That's how this needs turn into projects. We have to remind that the goal of this system need study is not looking for solutions themselves, yeah, but a point where the needs are, and the way to interpret this is that well, reaching Europe's Green Deal objectives in 2030 and also 2040 will require exploring all possible solutions, yeah, to bridge the gap. Also the system needs study express needs in terms of cross-border capacity because of the modeling possibilities, yeah, mainly. It doesn't mean that all those increases are the only solution. So, well, the identified needs can be addressed in multiple ways. including infrastructure, new infrastructure or upgrades of the current infrastructure, but also power to gas, hybrid infrastructure, and non-infrastructure solutions such as that dynamic light renting or other additional ones. But also the solutions can come from demand side response, from regulation, from market design, also that it's very trendy right now. Yeah, from sector integration, operational measures. So, well, all possible solutions should be considered by project promoters and by all that are involved in these topics. Yeah, policymakers also when these opportunities that have been identified turn into projects. Yeah. If we go to the next slide, well, we can see what we have in the TUNDP 2022, the projects that have been assessed in this project portfolio that have been proposed by project promoters. There are around 140 transmission projects, mainly AC lines. Also, we can see also an important increase of DC lines onshore and offshore since the TUNDP 2018. These values of DC projects have increased a lot, but and probably they will increase also in the future. But by now there are much more projects that are in AC. Also, we have several substations, phase shifting transformer, some compensation, and some transformers there. And related to storage, if we go to the next slide, we have around 23 storage projects, of which 14 are pump hydro technology, 6 are compressed air technology, and there are 3 that are electrochemical storages. I also saw in the slide though that someone mentioned the possibilities of storage that could be assessed. We have the ones we have here, the ones that have proposed the project promoters, but in the ENTSO-E Technopedia there is a list of all the possibilities that could have. So please take a look to that, because it's also a useful material. One interesting thing is that in this TUNDP we have less storage projects than in the previous one. And that's because probably we have some projects that are in competition. We also know that the storage projects, especially the pump hydro storage, have to deal with many environmental issues, and that's something that it affects a lot to the progress of these projects. Let's see what happens in the next one. And well, as last slide, yeah. Some takeaway, yeah. Well, you have all the information of the ENTSO-E website to dig in and get well, all the details of the TUNDP. You can also send any proposal, any question to that email that you have there. And as a main takeaway and related to the CBA, I want you to share with you that a robust cost-benefit analysis is key for neutral and transparent project assessment at the TUNDP, and therefore it's very relevant to have a consensus and involve stakeholders and improve its time much better the CBA assessment to have a better assessment also in the TUNDP with the assessment of the projects that we have there. Yeah. So, and that's all. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Patricia, for this overview and insight into the TUNDP, which is why we are basically performing and drafting the CBA guideline. And in the last minute, so we already half past, already done with the workshop almost, and I would like to give a short wrap up. So what we were doing today, we were giving an overview about the updates of the CBA guideline of the 4th version. And what we have yet not mentioned is that there are some improvements that we are still struggling, which we have yet not included in the CBA guideline. One is the indicator B81, where we would like to use some inputs that we received from the project promoters within the TYNDP 2022 process, which we call the project level indicator, the PLI submissions, where the project promoters were allowed to submit their methodologies based on what we have drafted in the CBA guideline. And this is something where we will learn from what we have received so far to update this indicator in the CBA guideline. And also the BA2 indicator, which is the Black Start indicator, this needs to be updated. I mentioned this earlier today. This is something that we are working on, and also the next 2 bullets mentioned when I was talking about the 10E regulation, the climate adaptation measures, and explain how the development of RES will or will not hamper, will not be hampered by the project. So this is what we are going to implement and work on. So which is what we will work on before we send it to the European Commission. If we manage, then we will of course implement it, but these are things that needs to be discussed also with the Commission and internally, and then when we find something, this will find its way to the CBA guideline. But also after having submitted this to the European Commission and ACER, we will have time for amendments after receiving the comments from ACER. So also, although we are not finalizing, or we might not finalize everything before sending it to the Commission and ACER, there's still some time for improvements of the CBA guideline, and this is how we have handled this always in the past. So the CBA guideline is a constant document of constant improvement, let's say. And what the main idea behind the CBA guideline is that we have a consistent methodology for Europe, for the EU, which means that it's always a trade-off between going in too much into the details, let's say, so that each of the specificities of each of the projects is captured, and of applicability within the TYNDP process. It's always kind of, we need to think about, is this indicator really giving a big benefit to all of the projects, or is this very specific that it just brings a little benefit for one of the projects? In that case, we need to trade off and think about if it's needed to implement this in the CBA guideline, or allow then for project level indicators, as we have done this in the past as well. So this is the main idea. And what we will do now is we will take as much input from what we get from today, and also from what we get from the public consultation in written, and go back in the team, screening all of the comments, and then think about what can be implemented in the CBA guideline. And of course, we will also give feedback to why we have included some things or why we have not included some things, as we have done this also in the past. And with the last slide for today, I would like to give an overview about the next steps, mainly already shown in the very beginning. So the public consultation will end beginning of February. Then we in the drafting team CBA will include some amendments based on the feedback from the consultation. And then we will send it by 24th of April to ACER, the Commission, and the member states, and receive their feedback. And after that, we will make a review period and final amendments then after the ACER and member states feedback, and then send it for the decision making by the European Commission, expected around 24th of October, when we are just counting these 3 months steps. Then we end up in October. And after this, we might end up with a approval of the CBA guideline in roughly 1 year from now on. So, and with that, I would like to thank you all for your attention and for the discussions so far, although they were basically just written and we were discussing, but I'm looking forward for the comments that we got also from the consultation. And then with that, I would like to close this workshop today. Thank you. And thanks also to all the speakers today. Thank you.